Nobody wants caramel cream K-Cups. Nobody wants almond amaretto K-Cups. Creme brulee K-Cup. I want regular coffee here. Butter toffee. Man. Alright, we got a really busy day today. We have all of our kennel techs on hand right now, and like all of our management and everything. Everybody is here today. So we are doing like a mega deep dive clean on the facility that Kayla and Sarah are heading right now. So we're going to kind of be working around everybody today. We'll probably be doing some work in the new space. I've been basically since like 8:30 this morning, like talking to people on social media, Facebook, stuff like that. Obviously, contact forms we have coming in. Just kind of new prospective clients. Doing a lot of initial communication, trying to get that stuff out of the way here. Then we got some training stuff we got to get into. So getting back to making some calls right now, and hopefully we get some interesting conversation out of them, and we could go from there. Hey, is this Earl?
Hi, yes, speaking.
Hey, it's David with Miracle Canine Training. How are you?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. How about yourself?
Pretty good. I got your contact form. Looks like you're having some issues.
Yes, I am. It's not been fun, but I'm having some problems, and I'm trying to weigh some of my options and different things like that. And I saw you guys' videos on YouTube, and I was like, you guys do a really good job, and you're not too far from where I live, so I wanted to reach out.
Sure, yeah. So, how can we help you? What's going on?
Yeah, so it all really started because just after Christmas, he actually attacked me pretty bad. He was trying to chase after this rabbit, and I'd tugged on the chain for him to come back, and he literally attacked me, and I'd get him off my arm, and I threw him off, and he lunged at me again, and I kind of had to wrestle him to the ground. Yeah. But even before, so that was kind of really spurted, and but even before that, he bites people when they get too close or when they try to touch him, and because of that, we're not allowed to really let people come by him or come over, and even more recently, he wasn't able to get his shots and stuff like that at the vet because we could not get him to calm down. We couldn't get him under control. We couldn't get a muzzle on him. Yeah. And he's just been very aggressive, and he's kind of been like that most of his life. I've had him since he was 8 weeks, and he's 11 years old. So yeah. Can't really go anywhere for long periods of time, and even worse, since he bit me, and my family members found out, like, nobody wants to have anything to do with him in terms of watching him or taking him out and things, which is understandable. Yeah. After what happened. So
yeah, no, I understand. Man, you're in a tough situation. Here's the thing, right? Like I speak with people that are in situations like this semi-regularly, and it's one of those things where I have always taken it upon myself, in the 9 years of training that I've been doing or so, and in the behavioral modification work that I've been doing, to not put myself in a position where it's not my responsibility to tell somebody to put their dog down, right? I think that there are people out there that I've worked with that have been in situations similar to yours, and they have, been like, I don't want to do it, right? And frankly, in some cases, in my mind, I'm like, you probably should, right? But, they wind up, they're like, I want to try to work through this. I'm going to make sure that I keep everybody else safe in these situations, and I'm going to assume the responsibilities of the potential that something like this could happen again to me, right? And I'm going to try to work through it, and those people can, in cases, be successful, and had I told them, you should put your dog down in this situation, the dog wouldn't have been able to live out, the rest of the years with those people, right? So I don't take that as my responsibility, but what I do take as my responsibility is to help people weigh the risks in these situations, right? So you have a dog right now that has bitten multiple people to the point of hospitalization at this point, right? So regardless of if you choose to try to work through this problem and assume that risk yourself or, euthanize, this dog can't be around other people anymore, right? It's not worth the risk. It's not worth the liability for you, right? Then you get into, you ran into a very extreme case with this dog. You probably, never in a million years would have thought something like this would have happened with them. Maybe, bite you, right? But probably not attack you to the intensity that you saw with it, right? And like you're saying, like I've worked with a lot of people who have been in serious dog attack situations before, and I've seen the amount of trauma and emotional distress that can cause, right? Just like you're seeing, like you probably whether you even have the dog or not, like walking in that direction and being in that place where something like that were to have happened is very challenging for you, right? And it's one of those things where I think a lot of people when they're in this position, sometimes they just kind of need somebody to talk to about it and help them understand that regardless of what the decision you make is, you're doing the right things, right? You are doing your best to seek out professional opinions on this kind of stuff. You're doing your best to try to understand both sides of the equation as far as your options that are at hand. And, in my opinion, you got a lot of risk on your plate if you were to choose to keep this dog still, No amount of training, quote unquote, fixes dogs. I know, even with some of the content we post in the YouTube videos and this and that, it's promising, right? All these dogs can make improvements, right? But you don't ever change the dog so deeply that those traits that they have in them are just gone forever, right?
Right.
And you then have to ask yourself, right, like, am I willing to take the risk that something like that could possibly happen to me again in the future? And then on top of that, your fiance in the house with the dog who's alone with him, there is a possibility that if the dog will still be around her, like if you don't just assume the responsibility of dog is only around me and nobody else, that there's also a risk that it could possibly happen to her in the future, right?
Right.
And those are the things that you need to weigh in these types of situations. And like I said, I'm not here to tell you what to do with it, right? Because I've had people where we've had this conversation and they're like, I still want to try it. And it's like, all right, if you're going to keep the dog, I'm going to at least help you, right? Even if I don't agree with it necessarily, just to try to help on my end to keep people safe, obviously. But you got a lot of risk on your plate where you have to weigh that out in this decision, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I appreciate everything that you're saying, and a lot of that, all of it actually it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
So
I don't envy the position you're in. It's hard. Like, nothing about this is an easy situation. Like you said, you've had the dog since 8 weeks old. He's 11 now. You've been able to provide 11 great years for him, which is good. It's a very, very challenging situation to be in. But in the end of the day, one thing I've always told everybody is, as we're making these decisions, one thing that's always stuck in the back of my head with this kind of stuff is people always come first, right? We love dogs. I love my dogs. I love all the dogs that come here for training, right? But in the end of the day, they're dogs and we're people, and we ultimately have to come first in that equation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the very wise words.
Yeah.
Very, very much. I do.
I've talked about this so many times before. I think I talked about this yesterday maybe, or I talked about it on the podcast yesterday or something like that. Constantly, this is why we put out the content that we do. Right? We don't put it out to get freaking Instagram famous. We're not putting it out to build our egos or anything. We're putting it out so people can have a safe place to build trust in us so that we could help them with these types of things, right? People that are struggling with their dogs need to know that there's somebody out there that's not going to try to hustle them on a fucking training program, right? In situations that they don't need it. They're going to look out for their best interest in things, right? And that's why we do this, right? So that we could have those tough conversations with people, or we could have the good conversations with people that are at the end of their ropes and thinking about getting rid of a dog or putting a dog down that may not actually need to do so, that we could actually help them through these types of things. So For as hard as that kind of stuff is, that's the reason why we keep doing the things that we do. Paige, I think you summed it up perfectly on New Year's Eve when you said, these are Paige's words. It's been such a rewarding year for our clients, dogs, followers, trainers, and staff here at Miracle. The gratification as we continue to learn and keep hold on the journey of growth of not only a company, but a community. Well, it's something we are continuing to be incredibly grateful for. We've learned how to reach so many more by the power of social media. We've turned an Instagram account into a safe learning space for everybody who reaches us, and it continues to spread to people who may not even know that they need to hear that day or time in their lives. For the new year, we will continue to be that account for everybody and more. We will continue to be that creative space that helps you learn, laugh, and get through the obstacles of hardships with new environments to keep these values that you've been taught through dogs. Don't underestimate yourself or your dog. A dog out there needs your support just as much as you need theirs. So I pitch for everybody in the new year to have a resolution of becoming more confident through themselves and their dogs. Paige, media manager. Right? This is a combination of learning to manage the dog better and incrementally increasing the dog's threshold to this kind of stuff, right? And there you could, and I don't say that as far as you can't find success with it, right? Because like we've had plenty of people have success with these kinds of things, but a lot of people will be very quick to just kind of sell you a training program to work through the problem, where that it really takes a deeper level of commitment. Man, 2 for 2, rough calls, very tricky situations. Aggression is not something to play around with, right? We talked before about, working with Kevin and stuff like that. And, it sucks because like the society that we've created of the things that we do with our dogs and the things we expect our dogs to tolerate has created a lot of these problems right now. In some cases, like obviously in Earl's case, like there's probably deeper things to it than just that, right? When you deal with dogs that have that degree of intensity with it. But a case like this, right? This is the prime example of we got a dog, right? We didn't provide training for it right away. We probably live in a chaotic household, right? Obviously, young children and stuff like that. No fault to the owner necessarily as far as that, right? And because we just think like we get a dog, we put them in, and suddenly they're the family dog and they should do great with everything and we should be able to tolerate everything. And then all the misinformation out there as far as like, oh, we have kids, so we need to make sure the dog's good with resources. So we basically just fuck with the dog all the time while they're eating or while they have toys. And again, I'm not saying this to blame them necessarily. I'm saying this for educational purposes here because this is the reality of these calls, right? It turns into these problems, right? And we could unintentionally like create a monster, and then it's like suddenly something like this happens. It's like, oh my God, like how could this have ever happened? And it's because there's not proper education on this kind of stuff and what leads to it, right? They thought they were doing the right thing, and I applaud them for thinking they were doing the right thing. Obviously, it sounds like he had done his research. He watches trainers online. He tries to educate himself on what to do to help keep his dog safe and happy in the household. But because there's such bullshit information out there, it leads to these things over and over again. So this is kind of this is good. We're a couple hours in here already, obviously, and you guys are seeing the reality of the shit that we deal with here, right? And the reason why we're in positions like this, and they sound like they're wonderful people, which were very receptive of the information I was giving, but some people they can't process that, right? They see a situation like this and they can't assume the responsibility for that situation, and immediately the finger goes to the dog of like, this was the dog's fault, right? So I don't know. You're getting some good freaking content right off the rip, Paige. She's been here now since Sunday, so what, is that 5 days, something like that? Crushing it. Motivation still is not quite where we want it to be. You know, again, she's got a little bit of weight to lose, obviously. She came in on not necessarily a proper feeding schedule, which we're kind of working on adjusting and stuff here. But from a training standpoint, she's doing incredible. So we'll kind of put her through some of the motions here. I got to get my session out of the way with her. And you guys can kind of see some of that in comparison to last time. Okay. Down. Good. Okay. Just finished up a session with Callie. That was a really cool session. So that was our second session of working the down command. And a lot of people make the mistakes of adding cues into behaviors, right? So we see so many people come in, they're like, my dog knows sit, my dog knows down, my dog knows all these commands. So we ask them, we're like, all right, we'll tell your dog down. And they'll tell the dog down. And one of two things happens. One, the dog has no clue what they're saying if they just give that verbal command. Or two, they'll do this. They'll go down, down. Hang on, I gotta redo that. Down, down, down. She looked scared the first time. I was like, and what happens is when you're doing that, the dog's not listening to what you're saying, right? They're simply responding to the visual cue that you're providing, right? So when we're conditioning in a cue, we have to make sure two things are happening. One, the cue is coming well before any sort of visual, any help or anything that we give happens, right? So I simply stand there, I say down just by itself. You have a pause to allow the dog to process that cue, hear it, and then have that cue predict something. And then you give help after the fact, after your pause, in as little of a way as possible. So in her case, we're using the downward pressure on the leash, and for the majority of repetitions, I was getting away with just the littlest bit of pressure to give that help, because we want to fade that cue out ultimately, so she just responds to the down command, right? Now, a lot of people get in a rush, we'll start a new command, and they'll be like, we'll do like 4 repetitions, they'll be like, why isn't he getting it? Why isn't she getting it, right? I always tell them, I was like, in all of Pavlov's studies that he did on classical conditioning, conditioning in cues, conditioning in behaviors, one thing he found to be true when he was conditioning in a behavior is that at a bare minimum, it takes roughly 50 to 60 repetitions that are perfect, which means perfectly timed, perfect amounts of help following that cue before the dog starts to make that connection. And we saw that to be true over there as she got to the point where we were getting perfect repetitions because she was getting smooth with that leash pressure. After literally like 50 to 60 repetitions of doing it in that room, we finally got her starting to respond to that cue solo by itself, right? So have a lot of patience with this stuff. Make sure you're doing things in the proper sequence, and do not be surprised that it's going to take you tons and tons and tons of repetitions to get some success with it. I'm so excited. Can you even believe it? It's gonna be so much fun. We're gonna have so much fun. So a couple key points here. You'll see we're doing a combination of right hand turns, and now we're starting left hand turns. So anytime we're starting, no, come. So anytime we're starting our off-leash healing with dogs, I always start with right-hand turns, because a lot of times the dog is on the left side, so we don't have to cross their path in order to do that, so it winds up being way easier. When I make that right turn, I don't have to walk into him, right? With the left-hand turns, I'm potentially running the risk of walking into him until he gets really smooth with this, so it can throw them off and it can be a lot more challenging. So what we're doing now that he's doing well with the right-hand ones, we're adding those left-hand turns in here and further proofing that understanding. Then once he does well, good. We stop, we reward for the behavior if he stabilizes into position with us, okay. Then we release him. We'll do that again here. Good job, buddy. Come. So I'll start with a couple right hand turns. Turning right, making sure he's turning with me. Turning right, making sure he's turning with me. Turning right, making sure he's turning with me. Now that he's doing well with that, we add the left hand turn. And that helps them heed to your space a little bit, right? He starts learning that he needs to keep a little more distance or else he's gonna get walked into with this. So, good. Awesome. Good. Okay. So you see as he's progressing here, what happened is for that first week or so that he was here, I think he's been here a week and a half, something like that, almost 2 weeks now. First week or so that he's been here was focused on build that drive, build that drive, build that drive, make sure he understands stuff. Now that we have that drive really, really high, we need to start teaching him to control that drive. So we're starting to get a little harder on him, getting a little harder on the boundaries with this so that he can learn to practice not only the drive and the behaviors, but the impulse control necessary to keep himself under control while a lesson is going on over there, while the cat in the house is running around, because that's been a big issue of his at home, while he sees other dogs, which he gets really jacked up when he sees. And that's ultimately what's going to keep him successful with this stuff, is that we teach everything in a motivational fashion. He understands it, but he also understands that he still has to do this stuff. Good job, buddy. Okay. So there's this guy, Brandon Fouche, out in California. He is like a trainer slash behaviorist. And maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, me and Tyler Muto became like fascinated with this guy. He kind of came out of the woodwork because he's like super on the DL. Like he's got a YouTube channel. It's got like 900 followers or something like that on it. He hardly ever posts on it anymore, but it's like a gold mine of socialization information, right? So Brandon Fouche has this philosophy that you could rehabilitate dogs, and that obedience commands are one of the worst things that you could use in order to rehabilitate dogs, right? And he primarily works with aggression issues towards other dogs, right? He does socialization related stuff. And his philosophy is basically that, which is you let things hit the point of just getting to the absolute max before it's going to turn into a problem, and then once it hits that point, if it teeters over the edge, then you shut it down, right? But the idea is that all of these, like if you have like socialization on a spectrum of like really, really chill to super freaking out of control, like loose cannon, like gonna explode at any moment, a lot of people will start addressing socialization problems somewhere in the middle, right? The snap, when things hit this energy level that they're not uncomfortable with, when you start getting scared of the noises, when you don't understand what you're seeing, right? And basically what he said is if you just take a step back and you remove yourself from the equation and you just let dogs socialize and you just let dogs interact with each other, typically 9 out of 10 times it's gonna be much better than you think it is, and you're gonna see progress because the dogs will actually learn how to interact with each other without the need of your constant micromanagement, right? So in the case of Rocky, when he first got here, he was extremely snappy towards other dogs, extremely uncomfortable with other dogs, and most people would look at that and they would try to shut it down, correct the snapping, correct the uncomfort, and try to get him to avoid and move away and this and that. And instead we took an approach of we didn't correct for it at all. We literally just allowed it to take place, and we incrementally added different types of dogs that would push him out of his shell more and more and more and more until we hit a point where he was able to just let it loose and learn, I can control this stuff. I can interact with other dogs, right? And because of that, we've seen such unbelievable progress with him over the weeks in his ability to successfully interact and regulate his responses, right? We've seen the snapping decrease itself to extremely minimal at this point. And when he first got here, what originally was like hard snaps and not necessarily attacking other dogs, but like much more committed types of behaviors. At this point, he's understanding he can communicate when he's stressed out without needing to take it to these extremes because he's learned how to self-regulate, right? And that's what I think is so cool about this kind of stuff. And I always say, like, when it comes to like aggression issues and stuff like that, like I feel like 90% of what I know about it comes from being able to watch these dogs interact like that and see how they handle these types of things, right?
You kind of learn some like common triggers and stuff like that. It's like, okay,
100%.
well, like that's just them just sniffing or whatever. But like you could see, like she kind of even like was nipping at him too for a little bit. But it was once he realized this is what I'm doing to you, kind of thing, and you're okay with it, and then it kind of like escalated to okay, now I can try to play with you a little bit, right?
All right, a lot of socialization we just finished up. Really killer session there. That's going to be very instructional for people. I'm excited for people to kind of see that and keep pushing kind of some of those socialization concepts more because that's what we really see people struggling with. Seamus is getting ready to do a follow-up session with a formerly extremely reactive dog. We're going to be working on, I think, some like pass bys and just simulating some of those types of things. We'll kind of see what we get. So, all right, let's do it. Real quick, when you say, so you say some of the walk's good, some of the walk's bad, obviously. Yeah. When you see the good ones, do you notice anything different as far as the scenario or anything like that?
Not really. Like the other morning we had those two dogs that we saw one time. I saw the dog coming, so he went down, and I mean we were on the other side of the cliff. That's pretty far out, but like once he sees the dog, he's so fixated on the dog. Yeah. But he went down.
We stayed there.
And stayed there.
Good.
And so, we were able to that.
Yep.
And then on that same walk, coming back on lake, on the other side, a lady comes, she had two dogs, and he was crazy.
Yeah. So when we're working with like really, really high drive or high energy dogs, the tighter of a parameter we're trying to keep, like on that walk, like those little kind of mistakes he was making about just a little quick little speed forward, but not a full mistake. If we're trying to nag on those types of things, what we could wind up doing is actually creating like 10 times more stress on the walk because it just kind of is like poking the bear, you know? Where that second time around as we went down and back, he was walking smoother. Obviously both of the times we didn't need any corrections for it, and you could kind of tell him, like, see him kind of loosening up a little bit more with it as you go. So keep that in mind when you're actually walking him too, is try to just almost make your parameters as loose as you can without him like fully getting away from you, but hold those looser parameters to like a much tighter standard, right? So when we do need to give the correction will count and be much more meaningful to him, you know? And that'll give us leverage then for when we see the dogs, that'll give us leverage for when we're around the other triggers and stuff.
Because of that, we can kind of push those boundaries a little bit more, right? I kind of want this to kind of let them hang out, let that kind of settle down, and then we can kind of wrap that up. But even this, I would still deem this a successful social, right? Because it was a problem, an issue that we were able to face and work through, and now we're going to end positively, right? So even though it happened, even though you had that reaction and stuff like that, we still worked through it, right? And that's just what we're gonna need to do. It's just gonna take a couple of these times of another dog telling him to screw off and him learning that.
All right, everybody. So we're getting ready to wrap up our day here. Don't mind all of the crates and shit in this room right now. Obviously, with our deep clean, we're moving things around where we need to. So, all right. So, very busy day. A lot of like a little bit heavier stuff here. More insightful kind of conversations into the realities of doing a lot of behavioral modification work and what we kind of work with here, which is a lot of aggression-related issues and how we rehabilitate those things and the realities of some of those things. Sometimes, obviously, we had some really tough conversations with people over the phone. We have some dogs in right now in for some serious issues like that. And, you know, just one thing that has been going through my head all day as we've been dealing with this kind of stuff, because in the last couple of days, we've dealt with some very emotionally taxing issues, right? With new potential clients and dogs that are here and stuff like that. And as I kind of feel it weighing on myself sometimes, one thing that I am constantly reminding myself of, and one thing that I speak with like newer trainers and stuff, I'm constantly kind of telling them is you have to constantly be making sure you're doing whatever it is you need to do to not let yourself get jaded by some of these things, right? Whether you have had 17 conversations in a row with clients that are seemingly giving up on situations that are not that serious, whether you're seeing people rehome dogs over situations that are not things that should technically be being rehomed over, whether you're talking to people who are having situations or have experienced really traumatic incidents with dogs, whatever it may be, this stuff is hard, right? And our job here is not training dogs. Obviously, we're working with dogs here, but we're in the customer service industry, and we are, 90% of the rehabilitation process is us playing therapists for people, right? We have to really deeply understand our clients, understand the individual issues that they're having with their dogs, understand the emotional traumas and stress that come with some of those issues that they're having, and we have to be the ones that are stable enough to help them navigate those things and help them navigate what the best avenue is going to be for them and their options and how they can weigh those options and figure out really what it is that they need to do, right? This stuff is freaking hard, right? And you need to be prepared for this when you get into this industry if you're going to be getting into any sort of behavioral modification work, so that you could make sure you're constantly doing your best work. I see trainers that have been in this industry for a long time who have hit a point where they've just heard it so many times and they're so frustrated with it and they've let it get to themselves so much that they no longer provide that support that the client needs, right? And even though they may be a competent trainer, even though they may be able to actually help with these issues, because they've emotionally checked out of those types of things, they're not able to get the deep results that they need to get. So be aware of these types of things. Hope you guys enjoyed today's vlog. I think this was a really, really good one. I'm very excited about this project that we're working on. And obviously, if you guys have any questions on things you want to see in it, or if you want to just let us know what you think, we'd love to hear it. But until next time, see ya.